I want you to have a look here at the range on this bad girl. This is an artillery strike 7 tiles away into a foreign territory at an enemy unit over a mountain as well. Kia ora everyone and welcome back. My name is JumboPixel and we've got a lot to talk about in terms of Humankind's not only its insane artillery, but the siege units and the transition of combat in Humankind more broadly. We're also going to quickly chat nukes because we've got more details there, and finally reflect on the combat system as a whole. And take a look at this. I've slowed this clip down and I'll show it to you again a little bit later in the video, but I'm sorry, it is frustrating to watch footage in such slow motion, but it matters. Look at the battlefield. The size of that battlefield is really unparalleled. These units are fighting across a roughly 16 by 16 open plain tile battlefield. You'll notice that they are lancers, cannons, those kind of units from the sort of early modern era of combat. And you'll also note, eagle-eyed viewers, that they have sort of dug-in bonuses and so on and so forth. The developers said in their sort of late game reveal, here's what we've done, that they're going to try and make it so that this era of combat, this grandiose era of, well, quite frankly, misery, really, around the sort of World War I time period, think around 100 years ago, we've got horses, we've got guns, we've got cannons, starting to maybe learn to fly, but not really, right? It's sort of largely human versus horse versus cannon versus gun combat on the ground in the trenches, artillery strikes, so on and so forth. The developers have said that they're really going to cater the battle experience and the combat experience in Humankind to mimic that, and we can see it as well when we play it out. Here it is again. Take a look at the size of this battlefield. Does this not feel like a more realistic, perhaps even more engaging simulation? Now, of course, in Humankind, when you're playing in combat like this, you can actually use the environment to your advantage. As I say, not just with the dug in, but also, if you'll notice, they've pitched some units quite high up, right? You'll see they're using geography to their advantage. And we've seen this in other 4X games before as well, of course. Think Civilization, right? If you're on the opposite side of a river to your opponent, you're going to take a combat penalty. So we've seen this before. This isn't new. In fact, it's intuitive, it makes sense, and it's somewhat true to life. But what we really haven't seen is the level of detail that Humankind and the developers, Amplitude Studios, have brought into it, right? So as I say, now you can see we've got tanks. So we've shifted slightly away from that really human-centric combat. Now more machinery are in place. World War I, of course, introduced the tank. World War II, really big fans of tanks by then. And here's another shot of a brilliant artillery range, again proving both of my points, that geography matters, but also that the size of these battlefields is absolutely ginormous. What's exciting, moreover, though, is that I think they've also handled something else really well, and that's keeping the late game interesting. I won't play the clip of the poor developer that I've put in my last 4 videos of him basically mimicking many people within the community sentiment, mine included, that 4X strategy games can become a bit of a drag as we move on. The way they've addressed it is, of course, by adding some tweaks to the combat system. This is but one arm, of course. There are many other things at play, like geopolitics, like trade, so on and so forth. But if we just focus in on combat for this video, what they have done is really quite clever. So in the early game, you're running around. In the Neolithic era, you've literally just got your scouts. And then as you move forward, you're sort of in this fairly comfortable combat game, right? You have warriors through to archers, maybe starting to bring in some gunpowder. Around that sort of mid-game period, combat's very simple. In Humankind, we can auto-skip combat. So in many instances in that early game, you may be inclined to just auto-resolve, particularly if it's just, a scout versus an animal or whatever, right? The auto-resolve, easy and quick. But then now, in the late game, we have actually quite an advanced combat system, one which isn't, really quite sort of linear and dumbed down. Sorry, Civ, but dumbed down like Civs, right? Where you got 1 tile of range or 2 tiles of range. There's a few combat bonuses, but that's sort of it. Humankind have taken it a step further. Another way they've done that is with the nuclear weapons. Now, if you haven't seen my other videos about the nukes, I'd recommend you check them out. I won't delve in too deep into them here, but what I can and should say is that in Humankind, the nuclear weapons really follow that same mantra. There's a lot of complexity and layers to them, but it's worth it, right? The artillery is more expensive. There are other factors to consider like dug-in bonuses and elevation and so on and so forth, but man is it worth it when you can fire at 10 tiles range. Likewise with the nuclear weapons. The cost to entry, the civics, the science requirements, the infrastructure, not only to build and test the missiles, but then to launch them. It's all very expensive, but what does it actually do? These weapons are incredibly powerful, the most powerful nuclear weapon we've probably seen in a 4X game to date, and moreover, mutually assured destruction has been added into the game by developers really simply by saying, when you launch a nuke, it won't hit until the next turn. Now, I've covered that in a separate video, so I won't dwell any more on it here, but it's a really fantastic thing, and I think it sort of brings the thesis of this video together. In Humankind, combat starts off simple, the same as Civ. You have a few units, they do certain things well, others not. It's a game of paper, scissors, rock, where you can play paper, scissors, rock over 1 or 2 tiles. And in Humankind, it's much the same. But then as you move through the game, you may be more inclined, if you weren't already inclined, you may be more inclined to actually play out the combat. This is the sort of endless legend, endless space system that we've grown to expect from Amplitude Studios, but really actually significantly improved in Humankind, and in many ways, of course, more relatable. We're playing that human experience. Now, how does Humankind's combat system allow us to do that in the late game? Of course, it's the intricacies of the battles. It's the fact that these things are happening over huge scale. And you could say, well, let's say I play Civ 5, I'm playing on a big map, scale is not a problem for me, and that would be true, but take a look here again. Here's another example of an earlier game combat that I auto-resolved. The map, despite having lots of interesting and varied geography, is actually quite open. It is quite open, right? Sure, you've got the mountains here and there, and you can see the cliffs here around Sus, but really, this map is actually quite an open battlefield, and that's what will allow us not only to have these artillery units with massive range, you bring in the air force and the significant amount of really powerful air units in this game, and you've got a really interesting combat dynamic that even for someone like me, and I have to confess, I am, by my nature, a bit of an auto-resolver when it comes to combat. I'm more interested in building my cities, engaging in wider geopolitical decisions rather than controlling individual battles. But it's even captured my interest, and I hope for that same reason that Humankind's intricate and detailed, particularly in the late-game combat system, can do the same for you. Thank you very much for watching. My name is JumboPixel. If you enjoyed, why not subscribe and join our small but growing community? And until next time, everybody, I'll see you out there. Take care and bye-bye.